Yeah, look, there's a big but in what you're saying there, Drew, about the inquiry mindset. Let's go to schools for a moment and take problem-based learning. There's been 26 meta-analysis showing it's one of our most notorious failures.
Hmm.
Now, it's seductive, it's beautiful. Who wouldn't want inquiry-based, problem-based learning? And the key question is, why has it not worked? And it turns out there's a very simple reason, is that if you don't have the content knowledge, if you don't have the skills before you go into inquiry mode, it doesn't work. And I'm sure you know many kids who we put them in problem-based groups and they haven't a clue what the content is. Well, they're left behind. The gap's there. So when the students have the content, problem-based learning is dramatically powerful. When they don't, it's not. The same with kids. You've got to be careful, I think, about inquiry-based thinking because it's very situational specific. You've got to also worry at the same time about, does the kid have sufficient knowledge, sufficient understanding to then use those inquiry skills? They're not generic. They don't go across all different areas. They are very much tied to the content. That makes them tougher, but it makes it more important that we as parents and teachers realize that in this circumstance right here that your child is 13-year-old is in, for her, it could be the first time. So what is going on here before you rush to saying, well, kid, work it out. How are you going to get out of this? It's a dual process. The notion that we really like is this concept of gradual release of responsibility. There comes a time where you do release it, but you don't do it from stage one and say, all right, kid, you got yourself into the problem, get yourself out. That's almost cruel and unusual. There is a moment. So yeah, nothing wrong with inquiry, but let's not treat it as a generic skill. Let's see it in the context to make sure we get that balance right of the content related knowledge, the situational specific knowledge, and also the inquiry.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And one of the discussions I continue to have and try to engage folks on is sort of this sort of direct and explicit teaching, as opposed to, and we do a lot of project-based learning work, and everything that we do as professional development is, as I say, through the lens of inquiry. So we're obviously advocates for that. One of the criticisms that I think is very valid and I talk about quite frequently is that, sort of it's lacking in knowledge, right? And so we say, it shouldn't be. And if it is, then we've got a real problem here. And so we want to really be thoughtful in design and how we structure work and the learning so that it is using and embedding, and that there is quite a bit of direct and explicit teaching in a good inquiry sort of setting. And I find it to be sort of a false dichotomy, but it's also a question, as I was reading this book, thinking about the ways in which parents might choose a school, and we can get to that as we get to that mind frame. But it does strike me, and it's a frustrating one. It's like that sort of inquiry and problem or project-based learning is either, lacking in knowledge, or its explicit and direct teaching is much more effective. And as I think you made a point there, is like there seems to me at least to be some middle ground there that is really, really powerful if we do it well, which is, not always easy to do.